Hola clase, this is Señora Plasted. We are finishing capítulo 4A, Cuando éramos niños, when we were kids. This is part 2, Gramática and Review, week 2, January 25th to January 29th. So before we begin, you know there's always a culture question that's going to be on the test, so make sure you write a sentence in English or Spanish summarizing this. So, juguetes mayas, Mayan toys. Los mayas no usaban la rueda para el trabajo, so the Mayans didn't use the wheel for work, pero crearon juguetes de niños, so they created toys for children en forma de animales reales and inventados con ruedas, in the form of animals real and invented with wheels. Estos juguetes eran similares al pool toy que se usa hoy. Those toys are similar to the pool toys that are used today. So, what does that look like to you? Next, grammar and review. In this video, you will learn about 3 grammar topics: the imperfect tense of regular verbs, the imperfect tense of irregular verbs, and a review of indirect object pronouns, all 3 which are on your test on Friday. Make sure that you watch the entire video, as it will take the entire video to get through all 3. So we're going to do number 1, the imperfect tense of regular verbs. In this section in Spanish, you'll be able to listen to and write about what children were like and exchange information about what you and other friends used to do as children. So, pause this slide and write everything down, including what's been underlined and this chart with Jugad title on the right-hand side, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so let's talk about it. You've already learned to talk about completed actions in the past using the preterite tense. Ayer Rafael patinó. Yesterday Rafael skated, which is done, and Mónica corrió en el parque. Yesterday Monica ran in the park. That's done. Another way to talk about the past is with the imperfect tense. Use the imperfect tense to talk about actions that happened repeatedly in the past. So instead of yesterday Rafael skated, Rafael patinaba, Rafael used to skate, like all the time in the past. Instead of Mónica corrió en el parque, yesterday Mónica ran in the park, now it's Mónica corría. Mónica used to run or would run all the time. So the verb jugar, to play, in the imperfect means you used to or would play. So yo jugaba, I used to or would play. Tú jugabas, you used to or you would play. Usted jugaba, if you're talking to an adult, you used to or you would play. Ella jugaba, he or she used to or would play. Nosotros or nosotras jugábamos. Notice the accent on that A. Without it, it's incorrect. We would or we used to play. Vosotros and vosotras jugabais. Y'all used to play. Ustedes jugaban. You all would or used to play. And ellos, ellas jugaban, they used to or they would play. So, this is probably the most important slide of this section. Pause the video, write this entire slide down, including the symbols and chart at the bottom, and then we'll go through the slide together. All right, the imperfect of AR verbs. The imperfect, like we talked about, is the incomplete past and is used to either describe a habitual or repeated past action, something you always used to do as a kid, or describe, paint a picture, or set a scene in the past without mentioning a true beginning or ending. So these are the AR verb endings at the bottom, and here are the symbols, all right, that to describe used to, would, was, or were. Right? Used to do it all the time, starting a story without finishing it, or saying what was happening, painting a picture of a background scene. So, AR verb endings. Yo haba, tú habas, usted o ella haba, nosotros habamos, vosotros habáis, ustedes, ellos, ellas haban. Make sure you write these endings down. All right. Pause this slide, write this entire slide down, and then we're going to go through this slide together. All right, imperfect of ER and IR verbs, which means verbs that end in ER and verbs that end in IR. So we have leer in the imperfect. You're saying I used to read or would read. Yo leía, tú leías, usted o ella leía, nosotros leíamos, vosotros leíais, ustedes, ellos, ellas leían. Notice how every single one of these I's have accents. It's so important. If you don't put an accent on that I, it is incorrect. And escribir in the imperfect, used to or would write. Yo escribía, tú escribías, usted o ella escribía, nosotros escribíamos, vosotros escribíais, ustedes, ellos, ellas escribían. So here are the endings of ER and IR verbs in the imperfect. Ia, ias, ia, íamos, iais, ian. Notice all the I's have accents. The yo form and the usted el ella form look the same. So how do you know which one it is when you're reading? You got to look for either the yo or the el ella or a name to find out who you're talking about. Imperfect trigger words. These words often trigger or cue you to use the imperfect because they imply that something happened repeatedly in the past. So, generalmente, generally. Por lo general, in general. De vez en cuando, once in a while or from time to time. Todos los días, every day. Siempre, always. Nunca, never. A veces, sometimes. And con frecuencia, frequently. So you must write these down because in the test you will be seeing these imperfect trigger words that trigger you to conjugate in the imperfect past tense or incomplete past. All right, so complete the sentence with the imperfect form of the verb. We're going to be talking about two girls, Lucia and Lola. Lucia would do bad things and Lola would do good things. So here we go. Lucia blank de vez en cuando. We have mentir, to lie. So we want to say, Lucia would lie or used to lie from time to time. Lucia mentía de vez en cuando. Notice the accent on the I. Now, Lucia and Lola got along together. So they say they played well and they would never fight. So Lucia and Lola jugaban bien. They would play together and they would never fight. Y nunca se peleaban. Notice what happened here. It got split apart. The se went to the front and it left AR. You have aban ending because you're talking about Lucia and Lola. That's a reflexive verb. Por lo general, generally, Lola, we say, would behave well. Same thing. Put the se in front. You're left with portar. Conjugate the AR. Lola se portaba bien. Oh, that's supposed to be one A. One, no N. Sorry about that. Las dos vivían en el misma calle. They both lived on the same street. Lola siempre compartía sus juguetes y muñecas. Lola would always share her toys and dolls. And Lucia would bother the other children. Lucia molestaba a los otros niños. Notice you got to pay attention. Is it IR verb or AR verb? All right, they change. All right, this is one of your activities that was assigned to you. So not only do you have to read and understand, you got to pick the right verb that fits. I did 4 out of the 9 for you, so you know how it goes. So Margarita remembers how, as a child, she would spend time at her grandparents' house. Write the appropriate form of the imperfect of the verbs. So you have 2 options. You have to pick the verb that matches, and then you have to conjugate it in the imperfect. So, cuando era niña, mis hermanos y yo blank tiempo en casa de nuestros abuelos de vez en cuando. So when I was a child, my siblings and I would blank time at my grandparents' house. So we know it's to spend time, pasar. We got to conjugate pasar to mis hermanos y yo. It would be pasábamos, right? Them plus me equals we, nosotros. We would spend time at grandma's house. Mi abuela, my grandma, blank cookies that were delicious. So she would what? Participate or prepare? She would prepare cookies that were delicious. So let's conjugate preparar to mi abuela to say she would or she used to prepare. Mi abuela preparaba galletas muy ricas y nosotros, when I say would eat them in the patio. Correr means to run. Comer means to eat. So let's pick comer. Nosotros comíamos en el patio. Remember, you got to put that accent there on the I. Ella siempre nos, she would blank más galletas, something more cookies. She would obey more cookies or offer more cookies. She would offer more cookies. So ofrecer, and she would offer them. Ella ofrecía. All right, I did the first 4 for you. Now that you know how to do it, you got to do the other 5 on your own for activity 14. All right, so to play with the neighbors, let's see how a conversation goes with this.
¿Jugaban ustedes con los vecinos? No, nunca jugábamos con los vecinos.
So, would you all play with the neighbors? No, we used to never play with the neighbors. All right, remember, used to or would, like something that would habitually happen in the past. All right, we are on number 2 now. The imperfect tense of irregular verbs. Make sure you write down this title. We're going to talk and write about what you were like and what you used to do as a child, and exchange information about what you were like and what you used to do in elementary school. All right, so pause the slide, write this entire thing down, the entire slide, and then we're going to go through it together. All right, so the imperfect tense irregular verbs. There are only 3 irregular verbs in the imperfect tense: ir, ser, and ver. Here are all the forms. So ir means to go, but in the imperfect means used to go or would go, right? Like I used to go all the time. Yo iba, tú ibas, usted iba, él, ella iba, nosotros or nosotros íbamos. Look at the accent on that I, so important you write it down. Vosotros and vosotros ibais. And ustedes, ellos, ellas, iban. Ser means to be, but in the imperfect, it's used to be or would be. Yo era. Like I'd say, yo era niña when I was a girl. Tú eras. Usted era. Él, ella era. Nosotros o nosotros éramos. Look at the accent on the E here. Vosotros and vosotros erais. Ustedes eran. Ellos, ellas eran. And the verb ver, to see or to watch, in the imperfect, used to see or used to watch, would see or would watch. All right? Yo veía, tú veías, usted veía, él, ella veía. Nosotros o nosotras veíamos, vosotros o vosotras veíais, ustedes veían, ellos, ellas veían. And this is another one of your activities that I assigned to you. I only did the first 4 with you, and the other 5 you're going to do on your own. So we're going to talk about Pedro Martinez when he used to play with the Red Sox. So, el papá de Ana María habla de los veranos que pasaba en Boston con su papá. So, the dad of Ana María speaks of the summers that he used to spend with his dad. Complete the description with the appropriate forms of the imperfect verbs ir, ser, or ver. So you have to decide, is it to go, to be, or to watch? And then you got to conjugate it in the past tense. So, when I was small, cuando era pequeño, me encantaban los veranos. I would love the summers. Vivíamos en Boston, so we used to live in Boston, donde mi papá y yo, my dad and I, him plus me equals we, blank al famoso estadio de béisbol de las Medias Rojas, Fenway Park. So we used to go, mi papá y yo íbamos al famoso estadio de béisbol, right, Fenway Park. Cada verano, every summer, nosotros blank a nuestros jugadores favoritos, como Pedro Martinez. So every summer, we would blank our favorite players, like Pedro Martinez. We would watch or see, veíamos, right? Mi papá blank originalmente de la República Dominicana. So my dad was originally from the Dominican Republic. He's originally era, all right? So now that I did the first 4 with you and you know how to do it, you can do the rest on your own. And number 3, indirect object pronouns. You've learned about this before, but we're going to have to review. We're going to talk and write about what people used to do for others and exchange information about what you were allowed to do in elementary school. You got to pause this down, write this entire slide. All right, you can write the right side first if you want, and then the left. Pause it, write it, and then we'll go through it together. So remember that an indirect object tells to whom or for whom an action is performed. All right? So indirect object pronouns are used to replace or accompany an indirect object noun. So nuestros profesores no nos permitían beber refrescos en las clases. So our teachers didn't permit us to drink soft drinks in the class. Sus abuelos siempre les daban regalos a los niños. Their grandparents always gave the gifts to the kids. Notice, a los niños, to the kids, you need to them, les. You don't always need a los niños, but you do need les to them. Because le and les have more than one meaning, you can make the meaning clear by adding a name, like this, a los niños, noun or pronoun. Lolita siempre les decía la verdad a sus padres. Lolita would always tell the truth to her parents. She would always tell the truth to them, les. Lolita siempre les decía la verdad a ellos. Lolita would always say the truth to them, les. Notice, les to them is there, even though these have switched to her parents, to them, to them. Like direct object pronouns and reflexive pronouns, indirect object pronouns are placed right before the verb, all right, or they're attached to an infinitive, an AR, ER, IR verb. So notice, le replaces a su hija, to her daughter. Siempre le quería comprar dulces a su hija. She always wanted to buy sweets for her daughter, to her. Le means to her in this case. Here's the conjugated verb. You put it before. Siempre quería comprarle dulces a su hija. Again, you can see the verb comprar, infinitive. You can attach le to the infinitive. So here are the direct object pronouns. We have me, te, le, nos, os, le. Me, to or for me. Te, to or for you. Le, to or for him, her, or you formal. Nos, to or for us. Os, to or for y'all. Les, to or for them or you all. So I give a tie to my dad, mi padre. Por lo general, ella le compraba, so she would buy una corbata, a tie, a mi padre for him. Le comes from a mi padre. So here's the trick. You can find the people at the end, a los niños, a los padres, a mi padre, and then replace them with me, te, le, nos, os, les. So let's see how it goes here in a sentence. Complete the sentence with the correct object pronoun. These are mandatory. These in the parentheses are not. So mi madre blank hablaba mucho. So my mom would speak a lot to me, a mí. It would be me hablaba mucho. Number 2, yo blank metía a menudo a mi madre. I would lie frequently to my mother. Yo le mentía a menudo a mi madre. Number 3, los niños nunca blank daban sus juguetes en la escuela. The kids never gave toys to you at school. Los niños nunca te daban to you, right? Their toys. Mis padres blank compraban muchos osos de peluche a nosotros. My parents would buy a lot of stuffed teddy bears for us. Notice a nosotros. You replace a nosotros with nos. They would buy us stuffed teddy bears. Mi madre blank compraba muchas muñecas a mis hermanas. My mom would buy a lot of dolls for my sisters. Mi madre les compraba. Notice les replaces a mis hermanas. So let's see 2 conversations how this works.
¿Les permitían llevar gorras en la escuela primaria?
No, no nos permitían llevar gorras.
So it says, would your school permit you all, les, you all, to wear hats in your elementary school? No, they wouldn't permit us, nos meaning us, to wear hats, right? Next.
¿Quiénes te compraban regalos?
Mis padres me compraban regalos de vez en cuando.
Who would buy you gifts, right there, meaning to or for you. Mis padres me compraban regalos de vez en cuando. My parents, they would buy me gifts once in a while. Who would buy for you? For me. So remember, to or for me, to or for you. All right, and review. So what you need to be able to do for the exam, right? Listen, I can listen to and understand as people describe their favorite childhood toy. You volunteer after school at the youth center to get to know your kids better. You ask them about their favorite toys when they were younger. See if you can understand A, what the toy was, B, how old the child was when he or she used to play with it, and C, where he or she used to play with it.
Mi juguete favorito era el tren eléctrico
en nuestra guardería infantil. Cuando teníamos 7 años, mis amigos y yo jugábamos muchas horas con aquel tren.
So his favorite toy used to be an electric toy train, and when he was 7 years old, him and his friends would play with the electric toy train a lot. So to speak, so now your group at the youth center wants to know what you were like as a child. You're going to, what could you tell them? You could tell them what you liked to do, what your favorite toy was, and how you used to behave. And that's what you're going to be doing on your writing test. And reading. You're going to read an entry in Armando's journal about his elementary school years. As you read, see if you can identify the main idea of the entry and determine why he liked or disliked elementary school. De vez en cuando yo pienso en mis amigos de la escuela primaria. Once in a while, I think of my friends in primary school. Jorge siempre se peleaba conmigo y Carlos me molestaba. Jorge would always fight with me, and Carlos would bother me a lot. Notice, bother me. Yo era muy tímido. I was very shy. Y no me levantaba a tiempo. I used to not get up on time para la escuela porque no quería jugar con ellos because I didn't want to play with them. All right, practice. Go to clever.com, click on the Pearson Realize app. You have activity 14 and 16, which we did the first half of. Guided grammar activity, the imperfect tense, irregular verbs, and guided grammar activity, the imperfect tense review of all of the imperfect. End of the week. These are your quizzes. You have pruebas and instant checks on the imperfect of regular verbs, irregular verbs, indirect object pronouns, and the whole chapter. And here are your 2 tests. You have Spanish, that's supposed to say Spanish 2. Spanish 2, Chapter 4A test, and When I Was a Child paragraph. This is about when you were a child paragraph. Describe what you used to be like as a child. Use only your notes in the model provided, or it'll be a 0. So describe what you used to be like, what you used to play with, where you would or used to go, and what you weren't permitted to do. You must use these examples in the model, but fill it in with your own descriptions, prohibited activity, playground. So, cuando yo era niño, or if you're a girl, niña, yo era, describe yourself. Yo jugaba con, I would play with whatever childhood pets or toys. Yo iba, I would go to the playground or daycare. Mis padres no me permitían, my parents wouldn't permit me to, and then pick your prohibited activity. And this is the translation below. All right, thanks everybody.